The 12-year-old who outsmarted a kingdom and changed history. The kind that don't show up in your school books. The kind that's been buried so deep in the dust of history, even the people who lived it tried to forget. This question mark. This is the story of a boy. Not a prince, not a soldier, not even somebody important. Just a boy. No last name. No title. No armor. No sword. He was 12, but by the time he turned 13, he had brought an entire kingdom to its knees. Yeah, you heard me right. Let's rewind the clock. Way back. I'm talking 14th century Europe. The kind of place where kings ruled with iron fists, children worked in fields, and the difference between living and dying was the warmth of your last meal. A world where if you were born poor, you died poor. And if you dared to dream bigger, they'd hang you for it. And in the middle of all that was him. They called him Luca. Now don't go thinking he was some kind of prophet or genius. Nah. He wasn't born with a crown, or blessed by a priest, or protected by knights. Luca was a street rat, an orphan, a nothing. He lived in the alleyways behind the baker's hut in the city of Viramont, a kingdom run by cowards in crowns and bishops who bled the people dry. He had no family, no bed, no future. But Luca had something the kingdom couldn't measure, something no one saw coming. He had a mind like a trap and eyes that missed nothing. At night, while other children cried themselves to sleep, Luca watched. He watched the guards, the merchants, the monks. He learned their habits, their schedules, the way the market moved. He figured out which shopkeepers were greedy, which ones were cruel, and which ones left their bread carts unguarded for exactly 11 seconds every morning. So one day, Luca timed it just right, slipped through the alley, snatched a loaf, and vanished before the baker even turned around. That might not sound like much, but in Viramont, stealing bread could get you your fingers chopped off. But Luca, he never got caught. Not once. Instead, he got smarter. By 12, he wasn't just stealing food. He was outsmarting merchants, guards, and even nobles. He could mimic accents, forge seals, and impersonate messengers. They said he once posed as a royal scribe and made off with a chest of silver coins meant for the duke. But Luca didn't care about silver. He cared about answer. You see, Viramont was rotten from the inside out. The king, old Henry IV, was a coward who ruled from behind velvet curtains. His taxes crushed the poor. His army bullied the weak. And the real power, it wasn't the king. It was his chancellor, Lord Ducreux. Ducreux was a snake in robes. He controlled the court, the council, and the church. If something happened in Viramont, Ducreux made sure it served him. And if you got in his way, you vanished. Nobody messed with Ducreux. Until Luca, because one night, deep in the back hall of the old monastery, Luca overheard something he wasn't supposed to. A meeting. A whisper. A secret so big, it could destroy the kingdom. There were 3 men in that hall. A bishop, a nobleman, and Ducreux himself. Luca had been hiding in the rafters, waiting to lift some silver candlesticks. But what he heard, it froze him cold. Ducreux was planning to kill the king. You heard me. Not with swords, not with poison. With paper. A forged decree. A royal seal. A fake deathbed confession that would make Ducreux the protector of the realm. A fancy way of saying king in everything but name. The bishop would bless it. The nobleman would enforce it. And the people, they'd never know the truth. That night, Luca didn't steal a thing. He just ran. Not because he was scared, though he was, but because for the first time in his life, he had something worth fighting for. Luca knew nobody would believe a street kid. He had no proof, no allies, no way into the palace. But he also knew something else. Secrets were only powerful until they were exposed. And Luca? He was about to expose everything. He didn't need an army. He didn't need weapons. He had a plan, and he had 12 days to stop a kingdom from falling into the hands of a traitor. 12 days. That's all the time Luca had before Lord Ducrow's plan went into motion. 12 days before the forged decree was discovered, before the king mysteriously fell ill, before a new ruler took the throne, one who didn't care about the people, only power. And the only person who knew the truth was a 12-year-old orphan with dirty hands and torn shoes. But Luca had something Ducrow didn't. He could go places nobles never would. He could hear what others didn't listen to. He could move through the cracks of the kingdom, and no one ever saw him coming. Luca's first stop was a small workshop hidden behind the spice markets. It belonged to a half-blind cartographer named Master Joran. Joran owed Luca a favor, back when Luca warned him about a group of palace guards looking to tax his shop into ruin. Joran didn't ask questions. He just handed Luca a stack of old city maps, tunnels, aqueducts, secret ways in and out of the palace. Things no guard patrolled anymore because they didn't even remember they existed. "You planning a robbery?" Joran had joked. "Worse," Luca said. "I'm planning a revolution." He smiled when he said it, but deep down he knew. This wasn't a game anymore. Luca had no army, but he had the street rats. Not literal rats, the name they gave to the children of the alleys. Pickpockets, chimney sweeps, stall runners, kids no one noticed, and who noticed everything. Luca rounded up 5 of the smartest ones he knew. Timo, who could unlock any door in under 10 seconds. Rena, a girl who could read lips from across a courtyard. Jax, fast as fire, never lost a foot race. Milo, silent as a shadow. You'd never hear him behind you. And Sabine, the voice. She could mimic nobles, guards, even priests. They met in the crypts beneath the old church. Candlelight flickered on ancient bones and stone walls older than the kingdom itself. "There's a plot to kill the king," Luca told them. They all laughed, until he told them the rest: the bishop, the noble, the forged letter, Ducrow. The laughter stopped. Every monster has a crack in the armor. Ducrow's was his arrogance. He believed no one could touch him. That made him reckless, predictable. Rena started shadowing his personal scribe, a frail man who delivered messages daily to the castle's legal chamber. Timo stole one of those scrolls. Inside, notes about a transition plan, dates, instructions, code words, proof. Luca memorized it all, then burned it. "Paper can be destroyed," he said. "But memory? That's harder to kill." Still, it wasn't enough. He needed something bigger, something no one could deny, and he knew exactly where to get it. There was one place in Viramont that even nobles feared: the Tower of Records. Inside were vaults of sealed scrolls, private correspondences, royal letters, most of it useless. But somewhere in that maze of dust and ink was the original royal seal, the one Ducrow planned to forge. If Luca could steal it first, then show the people what Ducrow had done, he could prove the whole plot was a lie. But there was a problem. The tower was guarded day and night, and the only way in was through the king's own library. That's when Luca got his craziest idea yet. Sabine would pose as a young page boy, bringing a message from the archbishop. Timo would forge the seal. Milo would sneak into the tower's courtyard the night before and unlock the outer grates. Jax would run lookout on the rooftops. And Luca? Luca would wear the robes of a royal scribe. "I'm too small," he said, looking at the outfit. "You're also too smart to die like a coward," Sabine shot back. The plan went into motion at dawn. And what happened next? It would change the course of a kingdom. The morning mist wrapped the palace in a thick veil, muting the bells and turning the stone corridors cold and hollow. On most days, only royalty, scholars, and high priests stepped foot in the king's library. Today, a 12-year-old orphan walked through those doors like he belonged there. Luca wore the robes of a royal scribe, slightly oversized, sleeves rolled to hide his dirt-stained wrists. In his hands, he carried a scroll marked with the forged seal of the archbishop, a document crafted by Timo down to the last wax ripple. The guards didn't blink. Royal orders were royal orders. But what Luca felt wasn't power. It was the crushing weight of what would happen if he failed, because Ducreux was already tightening his grip. Soldiers had started patrolling more aggressively. Rumors whispered through taverns about the king's illness. The city's air smelled like fear. This was it, the moment to strike, or be swallowed by the storm. Inside the library. The king's library was a massive hall, ancient, echoing, dust thick enough to taste, scrolls stretched from floor to ceiling, locked behind wrought iron gates. Statues of past kings watched from above, their stone eyes judgmental and unblinking. Luca had memorized the maps Joran gave him. He knew the record tower sat behind a false shelf near the back, a shelf rigged with a spring trap that could impale a man with 3 steel darts. Timo had shown him how to disarm it. One wrong move, though, and they wouldn't need to hang Luca. He'd die right there between volumes of royal genealogy and war decrees. With sweat running down his neck, Luca slipped behind the towering bookshelf. He pried at the hidden panel. Click. He froze. No darts. He pushed again. And then, the shelf slid open. Behind the wall was a spiral staircase. It led down, not up. Cold, damp, with stone steps slippery from condensation. Luca lit a small oil lamp and descended into the dark. The walls narrowed. Cobwebs clung to his face. But still, he moved forward, every step echoing the beat of his heart. At the base of the stair was a chamber, and in it, a single pedestal. Atop the pedestal, enclosed in a glass case, the royal seal of Viramont. It was shaped like a lion's head, its jaws clamped around a scroll. Heavy, ancient, carved from obsidian and gold. This was the key Ducreux needed to forge the king's confession. And now, Luca was going to steal it first. But the seal wasn't unguarded. The pedestal was rigged, pressure-based. Remove the seal and an iron gate would fall, trapping the thief until guards arrived. Luca crouched low and unrolled a sack of stolen tools. He had one chance. Sabine had warned him. You drop it, you die. You tip it, you die. You take too long and Ducreux finds you first. No pressure. With trembling fingers, Luca placed a moldable clay weight on the pressure plate beside the seal. He slowly slid the real seal off the platform, inch by inch. For a second, nothing moved. Then, a creak. The pedestal dropped slightly. Luca froze. Another inch and I'm done. He jammed a carved wooden wedge beneath it. The plate balanced. His lungs burned. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath. Carefully, he slid the royal seal into his satchel. He turned and ran, back up the spiral, past the trap shelf, through the aisles of dusty books. But just as Luca stepped into the main hall, a voice called out, "You!" Stop. A palace guard. 2 more appeared at the far end. Luca bolted, robes flying behind him, through the marble corridor, past stunned scholars, toward the courtyard. And there, just as planned, was Jax. He tossed Luca a rope from the roof edge. "Climb!" he yelled. Luca grabbed on, feet slipping, hands raw. The guards drew swords. But Luca was already gone, over the edge, onto the rooftops, across the tiles. And just like that, the royal seal of Viramont vanished into the night. With the seal now in his possession, Luca had the one thing that could prove Ducreux's treason. But proof meant nothing, unless the people believed it. And Ducreux wasn't going to go down quietly. He'd discover the seal was missing within hours, which meant Luca and his crew had one last chance to reveal the truth before the kingdom was lost forever. Ducreux was furious. Not the theatrical rage nobles faked in court. This was different. The kind of rage that burned cold and calculated. The kind that didn't yell. It whispered. It smiled while it planned your execution. Because by the time dawn broke, Ducrot knew. He knew the royal seal was gone. He knew someone had broken into the library. He knew it wasn't an inside job. It was worse. An outsider had gotten in, and that outsider knew everything. The manhunt begins. Wehrmacht turned into a fortress overnight. Every gate was locked. Every alley watched. Rewards were posted. 500 silver pieces for information about the thief. That was more than most people earned in a year. But Luca wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. He was preparing for war. Not with swords, with truth. Luca and his team retreated to the catacombs, ancient tunnels beneath the city where no guard dared follow. From there, they laid out the plan. They couldn't just expose Ducrot, they had to humiliate him. Because the nobles wouldn't believe a 12-year-old boy. But they would believe the king himself. All Luca needed was to get to him, the real king. Henri IV, the ghost on the throne, the one no one had seen in weeks. Rumors said he was sick. Others said he'd gone mad. Luca had a different theory. Ducrot was keeping him prisoner. If Luca could reach him, deliver the real seal, expose the forged letter, and reveal Ducrot's plot, it would be over. But the palace was sealed tighter than a vault, so Luca did what no one else dared. He planned to break into the king's private chambers during the biggest event of the year. Every spring, Wehrmacht hosted a week-long celebration called the Festival of Crows. Nobles danced, the church rang bells, and the people paraded through the streets in crow masks to ward off bad omens. This year, Ducrot had declared it a national event, even though the king hadn't been seen in months. That was the mistake, because festivals meant distractions, and distractions meant opportunity. While the nobles drank and laughed, Luca would sneak into the palace dressed as a jester's apprentice. Timo would slip past the armory guards. Sabine would forge the royal summons. Milo would cut the gate ropes at exactly sundown. Jax would trigger a fire in the courtyard to draw attention. Rena would relay the king's location through a network of street kids posing as servants. It had to be perfect, because if one part failed, they'd all hang. But Ducrot wasn't idle. The same day the plan was finalized, 2 of Luca's allies vanished. Older orphans from the market who'd once helped him deliver forged messages. They were found the next morning, hanged in public, with a sign nailed above them, treason. That wasn't justice. That was a message for Luca. And Luca got it loud and clear. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was war. That night in the catacombs, Sabine cornered Luca. "We can still run," she whispered. "Leave the seal behind. Go east. Disappear." Luca looked at her. "I've spent my whole life disappearing," he said. "Now it's time they remember my name." The night before the festival, the team gathered around a single candle. They didn't pray, they didn't toast. They just looked at each other. Kids who had nothing, now standing on the edge of rewriting history. "Tomorrow," Luca said, "we walk into the lion's den." "And walk out kings?" Jax joked. "No," Luca replied, "we walk out free." The streets of Wehrmacht were a blur of feathers, fire, and laughter. Drums pounded through the cobbled alleys. Dancers with crow masks spun in circles. Wine flowed like water. For the first time in months, the people were smiling. But underneath it all, something else was stirring. A coup, a rebellion. A boy with a satchel, carrying a kingdom's last hope. Luca stood in the shadow of the palace, disguised in a patched-up jester's tunic. He blended in with a group of performers hired to entertain in the royal courtyard. Painted cheeks, bells on his cap, nobody looked twice. That was the point. Milo was already inside, hiding in the rafters near the throne room. Sabine had forged the summons signed by the Council of Cardinals. Timo held the keys to the old servant tunnels. Jax stood by the torch barrels waiting for Luca's signal. Rena, somewhere in the crowd, kept her eyes locked on the second-floor balconies. This was it. Luca slipped through the side gate. 2 guards, distracted, laughing at a fire-breather's act. He moved like smoke, silent, smooth, up the spiral servant's stairwell, down a velvet corridor lined with portraits of dead kings, past the great dining hall where the nobles toasted Ducrot's stewardship. He was getting close. But then, footsteps. Luca ducked behind a curtain. 3 guards, in gold-plated armor, marching toward the king's chambers. At the front of the group was Ducrot. Luca had seen him before, but never like this. Ducrot moved like a man who believed the world belonged to him, calm, poised, smiling. But Luca noticed something else. Panic behind the eyes. The missing seal was making him nervous. That gave Luca hope. But it also meant time was running out. He waited until the hallway was clear, then slipped past the curtains and moved toward the king's chamber. The guards at the royal door were asleep, drugged, just like Sabine planned. Luca pressed his palm against the heavy wood and slipped inside. The king's chamber was dim, curtains drawn, a fireplace flickering low, and there, hunched in a velvet chair, was King Henry IV. But he didn't look like a king. He looked broken, thinner than the portraits, eyes hollow, skin pale, beard untrimmed. For weeks, Ducrot had been keeping him here, isolated, lied to, fed poison rumors and watered down wine. "Who are you?" the king rasped. Luca stepped forward. He reached into his satchel and pulled out the royal seal. At first, the king didn't understand. He thought it was a trick, another hallucination. Then Luca unrolled the forged decree, the one stolen from Ducrot's scribe, and he read it aloud. Every word, the false confession, the declaration of abdication, the blessing of Ducrot as protector of the realm. Henri's eyes filled with tears. "They were going to erase me," he whispered, "bury me alive in my own throne." "Yes," Luca said, "but not today." Luca handed the king the real seal. And at that moment, a blast echoed from the courtyard. The fire. Jax had triggered it. Smoke rose from the stables. Guards scattered. The nobles rushed from the feast in confusion. The distraction worked, but it also meant Ducrot would know something was wrong. Luca helped the king to his feet. "We have to go," he said. "Now." They didn't run. They marched. The king, weak but upright, with Luca at his side, moved through the palace toward the grand hall, where the nobles, bishops, and generals had gathered for Ducrot's official announcement. They burst through the doors. Gasps. Silence. The nobles stared, stunned. Henri raised the seal, and in a voice stronger than anyone expected, he shouted, "This boy saved your king from betrayal!" Ducrot stood in the corner, frozen. Then, slowly, he clapped. "Well played," he said, "but you forget, Majesty." He snapped his fingers. Dozens of guards entered, weapons drawn. "The army listens to me now." Luca stepped forward. "You sure about that?" he asked. Behind him, the doors opened again, and in walked the captain of the guard, carrying a second forged seal, the one Luca had let them steal. The room erupted in chaos. The grand hall of Viramont was no longer a place of order. It was a battlefield. On one side, King Henri IV, weak but standing, the real seal in hand, with a 12-year-old boy at his side. On the other, Lord Ducrot, the fox in velvet, flanked by guards loyal to his gold, not the crown. And then, the third party, the people. Because outside those walls, the truth was already leaking. Whispers, echoes. A child had saved the king. A boy had uncovered a lie, and the fox was finally cornered. "You think this proves anything?" Ducrot sneered, holding up his forged seal. "Who do you think they'll believe? A boy from the gutter?" Or the man who's kept this kingdom together?" He turned to the nobles. "I fed you, protected your estates, crushed revolts. Without me, this realm would be ash." Luca stepped forward, holding the real seal next to Ducrow's forgery. "This one," Luca said, "has the Black Lion's tooth chipped from the war with El Sare. That chip's been there for 20 years. Yours?" He pointed. "Perfect. New. Fake." He dropped Ducrow's version onto the stone floor. It shattered. Silence. Then someone laughed. Then another. And then a roar from the hall. The captain of the guard stepped forward. "My oath is to the crown," he said, drawing his blade, "not to a snake in robes." And just like that, Ducrow's protection vanished. Swords turned, helmets lifted. Every man in armor in that room now stood against him. Ducrow looked around, breath ragged. "You fools! You need me." "No," Henry said, stepping forward with steel in his voice. "We needed hope." He nodded to the captain. "Take him." But Ducrow wasn't done. As two guards moved in, he lunged, not for the king, but for Luca. A dagger flashed, a shout rang out, and Luca dropped to the floor, blood on his sleeve. Chaos exploded. But Luca didn't fall from pain. He tripped over his own foot. The dagger barely grazed his arm. The guards tackled Ducrow to the marble floor. His head hit with a loud crack. He didn't move again. The king rushed to Luca. "You saved my life," Henri whispered, "and my kingdom." "You should eat more vegetables," Luca replied, grinning through the pain. "You're way too easy to kidnap." Henri laughed, the first real laugh in months. Then he stood before the court and declared, "This boy shall be honored as a hero of the realm. Let his name echo through these halls long after we're dust." And for the first time in Viramont's long, bitter history, an orphan from the streets was carried through the city, not in chains, but on shoulders. The people cheered, the nobles bowed. And the boy who once had no name? Now, the world would never forget it. You'd think the story ends here, right? Ducrow dead, the king saved, the people cheering, our little hero crowned in glory. But nah, that's the fairy tale. In real history, when a tyrant falls, the chaos doesn't disappear. It multiplies, because power never dies. It just changes hands. And now every noble, every councilman, every bishop who once whispered secrets to Ducrow, they were looking for someone to blame. Guess who they chose? The boy. Luca didn't sleep in alleys anymore. He slept in silk sheets inside the royal palace. But with that came a new kind of danger. Letters arrived on his windowsill, unsigned, smeared in wax, promising a return to order. A stable boy was found poisoned. They said it was meant for Luca's tea. One night, someone tried to cut the ropes of the balcony outside his chamber. The message was clear. "You embarrassed too many powerful men. Now they want you gone." 3 days after Ducrow's fall, the king called for a gathering of the royal council. Luca was invited. He walked into that chamber wearing his old street tunic, not as a sign of humility, but as a warning. "I wasn't born in silk," he said, "and I won't die for it either." The council was split. Some wanted Luca knighted, others wanted him removed, silenced, forgotten. "He's a child," one bishop sneered, "not a savior." "He's dangerous," muttered a noble. "He exposed us all. What happens when he turns on us?" That's when Luca stood. "I never wanted your gold. I never wanted your throne." He pointed to the shattered royal seal, still on display beside the real one. "I wanted truth, and you hated that more than treason." Henry watched silently. Then, at last, he spoke. "You're right," he said. "You're not one of them, and that's exactly why you're the only one I trust." He turned to the stunned chamber. "From this day on, Luca shall be named first scout of the realm, the eyes and ears of the crown, answerable to no one but me." Gasps, murmurs. But none dared object, because Luca had the people, and no council could still singing songs about the boy who fooled the fox. Merchants carved tiny figurines of Luca with a satchel and a lion head seal. Children tied ropes to rooftops and pretended to escape guards. But Luca didn't let it go to his head. He didn't want fame or statues or riches. He wanted change. So he did what no noble ever dared. He went back to the streets. He spoke with the orphans, the hungry, the forgotten. And every time someone asked, "Are you the boy who saved the king?" he'd reply, "I'm just Luca." I got lucky, because not all of Ducreu's allies had vanished. One of them, a man more ruthless than Ducreux, more cunning than the council, and far more patient, had been watching from afar. And he wasn't just planning revenge. He was planning a new war. Every story has a twist, and just when Luca thought he could breathe, a new storm began to gather. But this one didn't come from the palace, or the market, or even the streets of Viramont. It came from beyond the mountains, from the kingdom of Selvara, a land of marble palaces and brutal politics, of silent assassins and gilded blades, and it came with a name, Lord Calvin Aurelian. Turns out, Ducreux had a secret benefactor, a patron, someone richer, colder, and more dangerous than any noble in Viramont. Lord Aurelian had bankrolled Ducreu's rise to power, funded his bribes, supplied his private guard. Why? Because he wanted Viramont. Not through battle, through corruption. And now that Luca had ruined all that, Aurelian wanted him erased. It started with a bird, a black raven, rare in the capital, found dead on Luca's pillow. Its wings were pinned by silver needles. A message was carved into its breastbone. "The fox was a pet. I am the master." Luca didn't flinch. Instead, he ordered the palace archives opened. He studied every trade deal, military treaty, and diplomatic letter ever sent to Selvara. And buried deep in a shipment manifest, he found it, Aurelian's name, linked to secret wine barrels, meant for the royal court. Only, the barrels never arrived. They vanished somewhere near the border. Luca smelled something rotten. He left at dawn. No guards, no gold, just a bow, a dagger, and a list of names. Sabine came with him. So did Milo. Timo stayed behind to gather intel. Jax handled palace communications. Rena had a different mission, one no one else knew about. They crossed into Selvara disguised as traitors. Within a day, they were ambushed. But Luca didn't run. He captured one of the attackers and made him talk. What he heard chilled him. Aurelian was planning to invade Viramont, but not with soldiers. With spies, merchants, saboteurs. He was going to buy the kingdom from the inside out. Following the clues, Luca and Sabine tracked a shipment of wine barrels to an abandoned vineyard outside Selvara's capital. Inside the cellar, they found it, a poison lab. Barrels filled with wine laced with a slow-acting toxin, tasteless, odorless, designed to mimic illness. Enough to wipe out the entire royal court. Even the king, even Luca. He snapped. Luca didn't just destroy the poison. He burned the entire vineyard to the ground. Sabine tried to stop him, but he lit the flames himself. "If they want to poison my people," he said, "then I'll burn their secrets to ash." And as the sky turned black with smoke, Aurelian saw it, from his tower balcony. And for the first time in his life, he was afraid. Luca returned home to chaos. The king had been poisoned, not fatally, but enough to put him in a coma. The council was panicking. Nobles were accusing each other. Whispers of rebellion stirred again. Luca walked into the throne room and slammed a vial of the poison on the marble floor. "They're not coming," he said. "They're already here." The king was unconscious. The court was on fire, and a 12-year-old boy now stood as the only thing between Viramont and collapse. Luca had no crown, no royal blood, no official title beyond First Scout. But people didn't bow to titles anymore. They bowed to truth, and Luca had earned that. Aurelian's poison wasn't just in the wine. It was in the palace, in the minds of the nobles who whispered in corners, panicked about order and stability, in the bishop who quietly proposed replacing the king with a spiritual council, in the merchant lords who offered aid from Selvaran banks with hidden strings. Luca gathered them all in the throne room and gave them a choice. Swear your loyalty to the crown, or show me your true master. Most bent the knee, but 5 refused. They were arrested by the king's guard. Their homes searched, inside ledgers, secret payments, Selvaran seals, proof. Luca held the scrolls up for the court to see. You thought this kingdom was weak, he said. You thought a child couldn't see through your lies. He dropped the scrolls on the floor. You were wrong. 3 weeks later, the king opened his eyes. His first words, "Is Luca alive?" They told him everything, about the poison, the coup, the council. He laughed, hoarse and tired, and whispered, "Then the crown is safer than ever." That afternoon, in front of thousands gathered in the palace square, Henry IV stood beside Luca and gave him a new title. At just 13 years old, Luca became the youngest official in the kingdom's history to ever wield royal authority, but he didn't use it for wealth or power or revenge. Just 13 years old, Luca became the youngest official in the kingdom's history to ever wield royal authority. But he didn't use it for wealth or power or revenge. He used it to rebuild. He fed the poor. He rebuilt the alleys he once slept in. He created a system where orphans could learn trades, read books, join the scouts. He visited prisoners, not to punish, but to understand. He disbanded the secret police, cleaned out the treasury, rewrote the tax code so the peasants could breathe again. Some nobles hated him. The people worshipped him. He didn't care about either. He cared about doing what was right. One winter morning, Luca received a package. No name, no seal. Inside, a single letter. It read, "You've delayed me, but history is long, and boys grow old. We'll meet again, when you're no longer a child, and then we'll see who wins." Aurelian, Luca smiled. He burned the letter in his fireplace and returned to work. He would go on to become a legend. Not because he ruled, but because he never wanted to. Not because he never made mistakes, but because he learned from everyone. And though many forgot the names of kings, they remembered the boy, the orphan, the trickster, the scout, the rebel, the child who walked into a throne room with nothing but a satchel and a secret and changed history forever. Now tell me, when's the last time a child outsmarted an empire in your town?